Welcome to Horror Makes Us Happy, the podcast where we ask the question, what is it about horror that makes us happy? Your hosts are Steve Becker and myself, Chris Whitman, and you can find out more about us at our website, horrormakesushappy.com. No dashes. Before we get started, this is the trigger warning. We will be talking about horror culture and horror things, so it is entirely possible that we may delve into such sensitive subjects such as physical abuse, child abuse, murder, rape, F-bombs. So, I mean, that's always a possibility, but that's not really what the show is all about. It's really more about a fun psychological experiment. I always feel weird describing it that way. We've got to find a different adjective. It's fun. We interview guests in the horror industry and get to the root of what exactly it is they enjoy about horror. But that discussion could delve into sensitive topics, which is why we have to do the disclaimer.
Yes.
And with that out of the way, Steve, what do we got coming up?
Well, still got more than 10 guests on the guest list, so not going to go through all that. As we've been saying for a while now, we do have a Discord server that we host listen parties of every Sunday at 7 o'clock Eastern. Chris also hosts a drawing party at 9 o'clock every Sunday Eastern, where he streams himself drawing the art for his webcomic pieces. There are links to his webcomic pieces in the book that I wrote on our website, horrormakesushap.com. The book that I wrote is a guide to the recovery toolbox. It's got 80 of the tools that I learned through 12-step programs and therapy work and all that kind of stuff. Mainly, it's supposed to be like a field resource guide for people who are new to recovery. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, check that out. Mm-hmm. Today, we have Rami Ungar, an author best known for his works Rose, The Pure World Comes, and Hannah and Other Stories. Welcome, Rami.
Hey, everyone. My name's Rami Ungar. I'm a novelist from Columbus, Ohio. And as Steve said, I have written a few books, Rose, Pure World Comes, and Hannah and Other Stories, among others. Pleasure to be here.
Our pleasure having you. Do you want to let us know what you're currently working on before we get into the meat of the interview?
Yeah, I'm actually working on a story about a 3D printer from hell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome and very topical.
Prints whatever it wants to, not what you ask it to.
Something like that. It's still very early, but I'm enjoying it. And I think once it's done, there's a good chance it could be a novel, though I'm aiming for a novella, but it'll be what it's going to be. But I think once it's done, it's going to be a really fun story, something like those horror paperbacks from the 70s and 80s, the one that Grady Hendrix is always collecting.
Interesting. Nice. Cool. Look forward to that. So I don't know exactly what we talked about before when scheduling this, but the general gist of how we do this is we ask a bunch of questions about your childhood, teenage years, and adulthood. Try to find out what your experience with the genre has been, and then if any common themes keep cropping up across those three, then we have sort of a follow-up section at the end where we talk about what those topics are that keep cropping up for you and why those are important to you and how that intersects with the horror genre. But starting off with childhood, what are some of your earliest memories of scary things?
Okay, so this is what I attribute to my love of horror. So I may have been about 5 or 6 at the time. Now, I'm Jewish and my parents are both rabbis. And so going to synagogue growing up was pretty much mandatory.
Yep.
But because my dad was the head rabbi of the synagogue and my mom ran the education department, I felt like I had free reign to wander the synagogue on Saturdays. And behind the bima in the sanctuary, which is basically where the altar and the Torah was this hallway that led to the furnace and boiler rooms or whatever. And I thought I'd explore that at one Saturday. And these two teenagers who worked for the synagogue were picking up prayer books and stuff from the aisles, and they saw me go in the hallway behind the bima. Now, that hallway had 2 entrances, so one went in behind me and one went in the other one ahead of me. So they met me somewhere in the middle, and they scared the crap out of me by saying, "Do you hear that noise? Do you hear that noise?" And it was probably just like the pipes running or something. But me being 6, I was really scared, so I just nodded my head, and they said, "That's the sound of death. Death is coming for you." I ran out of there and about halfway to my dad's office before stopping. But when I went in there again about a week or 2 later, nothing happened. No teenagers popped out to scare me. Nothing popped out to kill me. And I think that was pretty instrumental in my development in becoming a horror fan, because I was scared, but I survived. And I learned that fear could be conquered and controlled. So I feel like that was my earliest experience where I became interested in horror, though it didn't really start to manifest for a while.
Yeah, no, that's a good introduction to horror. It's kind of like a perfectly placed equation. You had the natural scare, and then the recreation of the exact same environment, and then the rationalization of, oh wait, that was just circumstances. Okay.
Honestly, I think I repressed that memory for a number of years. I remembered it in college, and I called my dad up and I was like, "Hey, do you remember these 2 teens who used to work at the synagogue?" I described them and he's like, "They did that to you? Wow."
Kids
of course, this was several years after we moved from that synagogue to Columbus, so bringing it up didn't cause any trouble.
Good. I can relate. He passed away when I was a year old, but my grandfather was the deacon of our church and my grandmother was the head lector. And so she would read the mass on Sunday, one or two, and then she also spoke Polish. So when somebody couldn't make the Sunday masses for the Polish ones, she would sometimes read those as well. And this is back in the days when, who needs a babysitter? She was raising me and she would just put me in the first pew so she could keep an eye on me when she was up there. And so there was days where I was there for 4 masses every Sunday. And in between the masses, like you say, I had free run of the place because I was her kid and everybody knew her. So I would be walking around all the halls and go in the places where nobody else necessarily needs to go. And also at times when nobody else was there. So it was a very liminal space and very, not creepy, but like eerie,
Yeah, churches can definitely be eerie. Doesn't matter what style of architecture. It could be old European Gothic or very new state-of-the-art buildings. Sometimes and it can be just about any religious building. They can be creepy.
It doesn't even have to be religious building. It's just the idea of I'm not supposed to be here. Nobody's supposed to be here. And yet I am here doing something that I want to say I shouldn't be doing, even though all I'm doing is walking around and looking. But, there's that social barrier of, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm doing something I'm not supposed to do just by being here.
I think religious buildings, though, they're scarier just because...
That's true, yes.
Yeah, you're basically told from the moment you enter, you're being watched by an invisible being with superpowers.
Yeah. Yeah, and it didn't help that this particular church was connected to a school, and that school had a room that was supposedly haunted.
Nice.
Aren't they always, though? Yes.
Well, this one in particular, there was a room above the gymnasium that looked out over the gymnasium, and it's where there was a piano there, and if you took piano lessons, you were supposed to go to that room. But to get to it, you had to walk down this long hallway that nobody ever really walked down because the only thing there was the piano. So there was always this, not well lit and very few people would travel. There'd be nobody there basically. So, there was that. And then they would talk about how there's some ghosts in the room because sometimes they would look up at the window where the piano was and they'd see somebody standing up there when there wasn't, nobody up there kind of thing.
Classic.
Yeah.
Creepy.
All right. So you had this experience. What other experiences with the genre do you remember from your childhood?
I think the experience that really pushed me to the genre was reading it when I was 11 or 12.
Oh, okay.
So I've been reading some Anne Rice up until then, and my family was on vacation in Delaware, Rehoboth Beach, and we're big readers. So Oh, of course, we stopped at a bookstore, and I just finished whatever Anne Rice novel I'd been reading up till then, and so figured, maybe I'll try something different. And my mom was like, "Try Stephen King." He works on some very dark topics too. You might like him.
Yeah.
Thing about my mom, she doesn't really consider King horror. He doesn't scare her, so she doesn't consider him horror.
Okay.
So I go along the bookshelves and I find King, and I'm looking at the different titles, and I see It, and I recognize It because I'd seen the DVD for the TV miniseries at a cousin's house. I hadn't watched it because we didn't put it on, but I recognized it. So I was like, so that's what that's based on. I guess I'll read it. Did not realize I was getting into an 1,100-page book. But I started reading it, and pretty soon I started having nightmares about Pennywise coming up to the house we'd rented and tapping on my window to get in. But I kept reading, and I loved what I was reading. I actually just reread the book on audio recently, and it's still as amazing and as effective now as it was then. And I ended up finishing the book about a month later at summer camp. And I'm just sitting there on the deck of my bunk, and I'm just thinking of my cabin. And I just think to myself, I want to write stories like this. I wanted to be a writer since I was 10, but at that point, I knew then I wanted to write horror stories like It.
I just want to let you know that I am absolutely going to pull that as an excerpt and tag Stephen King. Because that is hilarious. Mom doesn't consider King horror because he doesn't scare her.
That's a good way to get his attention. Challenge him, you know? Oh, we don't consider you horror. Oh, really?
I'm sure my mother will love that. I will love that.
Lots of people are going to love that.
Heck, maybe he'll send my mom a signed book.
Yeah, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe he'll send her something very dark and very scary and be like, okay, you say I'm not horror, try this.
Right? Put her in the thank you or the acknowledgements part of a book for Rami's mother. So yeah, that while we were talking about this, I was really interested. So, first you said reading It at 11 or 12, and then you say, and I was reading Rice before that. So, clearly there was, and you didn't mention what Anne Rice book you were reading, but I know, she's well known for the Gothic horror stuff. So even if it was not necessarily related to, Interview with a Vampire, that series, I think her other work was in that same vein too. So it sounds like you had already had that introduction. Do you remember what the introduction to the genre was?
Introduction. I think it might have been Goosebumps.
Okay.
I did read a little bit of Goosebumps growing up, especially around third or fourth grade. And after that, I did start reading Anne Rice, though I never really considered her work horror. She called them Gothic dramas or Gothic sagas when she was alive, so I guess I considered them that too. I mean, I love how they were much deeper than the books I'd read before were. How, they were so very full of these concepts that went deeper into the mind than anything else I'd read before. I didn't always understand it, but I loved it. Yeah,
drama is a good word for it because it deals with the deeper characterization and, motives and all that kind of stuff. And it's not just surface level stuff. So your mom doesn't consider King horror. Is she a horror fan in general, or is it just that she considered reading that because she didn't think that was horror?
My mom used to be a horror fan. She's not so much anymore, but she'll read my work.
Okay.
She works as a hospital chaplain, so she sees some pretty sad stuff. And the last thing she wants to deal with when she gets home is, a book about a ghost chasing teenagers around a haunted mansion, or something involving a giant crab monster from deep beneath the earth, or a serial killer who only goes after clowns.
Right. Ooh, so here's the real question: Does your mom consider your stuff horror?
She does, and sometimes I have to tell her to skip certain things I write or publish just because I know she's going to not be able to handle it. Like with my latest book, Hannah and Other Stories. The third story in that is called The Autopsy Kid and Dr. Sarah, and it is as close to extreme horror as I'm going to get. It's about a teenage girl who gets entangled with this budding serial killer, and he forces her to basically play autopsy with him on dead animals. And I was like, Mom, you're going to have to skip over that one because I know that's not your thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And
It's funny how many people are upset by, animal deaths. Like, does the dog die? But people deaths is fine. You gotta watch out for the animal death.
Yeah. So she actually glanced at that particular story and was like, oh yeah, I'm skipping this one. I do not want to read this. And then the very next story had carnivorous horses. So that scared her pretty bad. She now can't even think of a horse without thinking of my story.
Is there anybody else in your family that was fans of horror when you were a kid?
Yeah, actually, I've got 4 younger sisters. I'm the oldest and the only boy. And my sister Maya, she really likes scary movies. So when we see each other, we often talk about what scary movie have you seen recently? What did you think? Oh, have you checked this out? And my youngest sister, Liat, she doesn't watch horror movies, but she loves reading horror books when she has the time. Mm-hmm. So I've often gotten her books to read when she has a moment. She's a grad student, so not many of those moments these days. But when she does have them, she does like to read a good spooky story.
Okay. Did you participate in Halloween when you were a kid?
Oh, yeah, every year. Or I would find something to dress up as. And even today, I still participate. I mean, I don't go trick-or-treating. I'm far too old. But I'll decorate my yard, and I'll find a costume to wear. I'll put on a couple of horror movies. If I can, I'll invite a friend over, and we'll just sit, eat pizza and candy, and drink wine and beer, and just have ourselves a spooky old time.
Cool. Did you have a favorite costume when you were a kid?
I think vampires. I like to dress up as Dracula a lot.
Okay. Any least favorite costumes?
Not that I can remember. I can tell you about the thing I dressed up as that was the least scary thing ever.
If that was your least favorite, that would not be surprising, because there are a lot of people who have said either the thing that was least favorite for them were the things that weren't scary, or like low budget, shall we say, didn't have a lot to put into it.
Well, when I was 6 years old, I went as a Charmander, from Pokemon.
Okay.
So, yeah, that is probably the least scary thing I've ever gone as. Or Yu-Gi-Oh! I was Yu-Gi-Oh! When I was 12.
Nice.
But, yeah, mostly I like to do scary costumes. I mean, last year I went as Cthulhu.
Nice.
Yeah, so I had this big Cthulhu kigurumi, which is like a Japanese onesie that I wore. And I answered the pizza guy when he arrived wearing that costume. Nice. And he actually recognized it. And he was like, oh, dude, Cthulhu, nice. And I was like, yeah, man, happy Halloween. And the year before that, I was the king in yellow. So I was just out on my lawn taking a photo of my jack-o'-lantern all lit up. And I'm wearing a yellow robe with a hood and a white mask. And the pizza guy, same company, different
same
driver.
Pizza guy?
No, okay, different driver. Comes up and is like, pizza? And I'm like, thank you. I'm pretty sure I startled him a little.
Yes.
Cool.
That is awesome.
So the next 2 questions we're going to ask as a pair. We're going to start with the negative one first so we can end on the positive one. Do you remember the first person you hurt?
One time, one of my sisters climbed on my back and was nearly strangling me. I don't know why she did that, so I backed into the doorknob. So that hurt. And for some reason, she did it again a few weeks later.
Nice. Did you do the same thing?
Yes. She learned her lesson that time.
I was going to say, apparently she doesn't learn too quickly. Do you remember the first person you helped?
Oh, I don't know if it helped, but in third grade, we did this letter writing thing to soldiers this was right after soldiers had been deployed to Afghanistan. So we wrote some soldiers letters of encouragement. So maybe that? I don't know. Does any soldiers listening to this, do you remember getting a card from a third grader in Toledo, Ohio?
I don't know about Toledo, Ohio, but I'm sure that there are plenty of soldiers who remember receiving those letters and probably did appreciate them.
I would hope. I think I wrote a pretty terrible letter. For one thing, I didn't really understand what was happening. I was young. I was 8 years old, and I just didn't pay much attention to world events.
Yeah.
Also, my handwriting was atrocious then. My Y looked like X's with a very long left leg.
I mean, you were in third grade. I'm sure they didn't have the highest expectations. Perceptions tempered. So a lot of our guests have talked about having sort of this dividing line where before that line, horror was scary to them. And then after that, it was enjoyable to them. You did mention this situation in this sort of tunnel at the synagogue. Was there anything before that you remember being scared of in terms of like the genre? Because it sounds like after that, because like you said, you went back the second time and felt like you had conquered that, and now maybe that was a positive experience. But do you remember anything before that?
I can't really remember that far back, so I'm going to say no. However, I do know that it still took me some time to get really into horror. Like, I remember when this movie, The Littlest Vampire, came out.
Okay.
Or maybe it was the first time it was on TV. I can't remember. Either way, I might have been 7 or 8, and I remember saying to my parents, I think that's too scary. I don't want to see it. At that time, the most I would do with scary was probably either Scooby-Doo or Batman the Animated Series.
You mentioned you wanted to be a writer by the time you were 10. What was that? How did that come about?
Well, you know how kids are. They always want to be like everything. I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a scientist. I want to be a rock star. And I went through that phase myself. At one time, I was very sure I was going to be a mad scientist and I'd be working with chemicals that exploded. At other times, I thought I was going to be a rock star and dreamed of days when I played sold out stadiums. Never bothered to learn how to play a guitar, though. But I kept coming back to writing.
Right.
I love telling stories, so I would constantly be coming back to writing this or that story. And at one point, I was just like, I think I was 10 at this time. I was just like, you know what? I really like doing this sort of thing. I really like writing. I should commit to it. And I did. And 20 years later, I've got 5 books out. I'm working on getting more out there. And I've got a nice, small, but very dedicated following. So I'm very happy with the progress I've made.
Yes. Hope it continues.
Yeah.
From your mouth to God's ears.
Yeah, right. Moving into teenage years, what horror, either books or movies or stories or, what jumps out to you in your memories from those years?
Oh, I was watching a lot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer in my teens.
Okay.
I never got into it. So many people like it, and I know it's a blasphemy that I say that, but I do it.
Yep.
It's not for everyone. But Buffy was pretty big for me, so I got really into that. I also watched a lot of X-Files on DVD, so that kind of helped shape my interest in horror. I also watched movies like Van Helsing or League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which I know people don't think highly of, but I actually love those movies, and I had a lot of fun with them.
So That's probably like the fourth reference to vampires that you've made during the call so far. Do you have a thing with vampires?
I used to be pretty much all vampires. Like one point I wrote like 3.5 books just about vampires.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I just was really in love with the idea of like being able to rise from the grave, of being able to drink blood to stay young forever, of all the superpowers like transformation. I still actually every now and then write a vampire story or something that's kind of vampire adjacent, but I don't want to be too overt about it because comes with all these expectations. One story I wrote, there's a twist in the end where the antagonist's daughter has basically got a medical condition that forces her to participate in vampirism. And she hates it, but it's the only way she can stay alive and grow stronger.
Which is, as you say, not I won't say it's a trope in vampirisms, but it's like, what's the word I'm looking for?
A staple?
Yeah, I guess that's a good word. That it's a common element that there are people who don't necessarily want to do this, but they don't have a choice because that it's either that or die. So,
common theme.
Yes, there you go.
These days, though, you go.
I was just going to ask about the X-Files if there's a particular episode or two that jumped out to you.
Couple that I do remember fairly well was one episode was about Mulder and Scully going to investigate this small town where a couple of kids have been brutally killed, and it's all linked to Satanism. And there's apparently a demonic summoning and a cult involved. That one was really spooky and stuck with me. Another was they're investigating weird happenings at this Haitian refugee camp, and voodoo is involved. That one I remember very well, and I was like really spooked by that one.
Okay.
Was that they probably went into the whole origin of zombies?
I think that might have come up. I think it was more about like what the Loa, the spirits, the gods are able to do, and like how if you find something in your car, it means that hex has been placed on you or something.
Okay, right. Classic voodoo. Loves me some occult, even better.
The crazy thing is, I've actually studied voodoo since then, and actually know a couple of spells that I perform on occasion. And who knows, I might delve a bit deeper and expand my learning someday.
If you ever plan on making a voodoo doll of me, I am 6'7" and I have bright orange hair and about 23 pounds. Yep, there you go.
23 pounds.
I was looking for just some kind of impossible number.
Oh, okay. I thought you're going for someone more specific.
No, it's random. I mean, no, that's me. That's exactly what I look like.
I'll keep that in mind, though. Actual voodoo dolls are more about, helping. They're a kind of magic that,
really?
The whole torture voodoo doll thing is more of a Hollywood invention. Voodoo dolls are meant to channel energy to be helpful. So, like, maybe you can help with constant pain or give you confidence. It's not something I use much, but I do know that a lot of the ideas we have about voodoo dolls are, well, just basic Hollywood BS.
So what he's doing is he's tricking you into giving him a better description.
Shit. It worked. I was about to.
Oh no, you figured out my evil plan.
Curses! Thwarted again!
Back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
And that is very interesting, though. That's the first thing that popped into my head when you said it was kind of a misnomer or misunderstood. Is like, I bet it's exactly the opposite, and Hollywood has just twisted it that way. Yeah. It's funny how many things work out that way.
Yeah, Hollywood does that a lot. I mean, like, how many portrayals or interpretations of paganism are they're devil worshippers, they have lots of sex, they are very weird and dark and cruel. But
it's not just Hollywood, but media in general. I mean, if it bleeds, it leads.
2,000 years There's of anti-pagan propaganda, and there's actually a pretty large and active neo-pagan Wiccan community here in Columbus, and I've met them. I've met a lot of these people, and they are some of the nicest people I've ever met. They're always friendly and willing to give you a hug, and they're willing to talk to you about tarot cards or candles, or just trying to get the negative vibes out.
But don't get on their bad side.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course.
You only have to worry about that if you go to Witch Lab and piss off someone there.
Witch Lab?
Yeah, it's a store that sells like candles and stuff. It's actually pretty cool.
Oh, Witch Lab, like a witch's laboratory. I was thinking like Witch Lab, like this is the IT in me, like a lab, like you have a contained environment and a recreation for testing purposes. Like, it's a witch lab.
Oh, what's the word
I'm
for
sure
it?
It could be that too.
What the hell's the word for it? Where no dust, clean room.
Yes, witch clean room. Oh, God. No such thing.
Yeah, right.
I mean, they use earth magic, so there's dirt involved.
Right. Now we're getting to the SCP territory.
Hoodoo.
Yes. Hoodoo.
You do.
You do. Remind me of the
bang. Yes. Anything in real life terrify you as a teen?
Getting into college. That definitely scared me.
That is a big stress point, yeah.
But no, I don't think anything really scared me as a teenager.
Okay. Anything
as an
in
adult?
Your teenage?
I'm scared as... You first.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as an adult, all I fear is not being able to pay my bills and rejection.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, rejection is a big one. It's the dumbest fear ever, but it's a big one.
I have reoccurring nightmares of that one.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, are you referring to like emotional rejection or just like having your work rejected from publication, or is there like a bit of both?
Emotional rejection. People just misunderstanding me and hating me and never wanting to speak to me again.
Okay.
Well, people suck.
Yeah, and it is something I have to worry about in real life because I'm on the spectrum. So sometimes social situations, I put my foot in my mouth or I cross a line and I don't even realize it until after there's somebody has already been pissed off and walked away. And then I'm like, wait, what happened? I thought we were having a good time. And then someone sits me down and is like, Rami, this is what you did or what you said that really upset them. And I was like, oh, holy shit, did that actually upset them? I had no idea. I just thought it was part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, can relate. I figured that was going to go one of two ways. Either I don't remember saying that because sometimes you get so wrapped up in the heat of a conversation, you're like, oh shit, did I really say that? Or the more common, which is, that's not acceptable? Why? I don't understand. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's something I've had to worry about. I still worry about. And when I write characters who are on the spectrum like me, it's something they worry about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we just talked to Todd Kiesling, who has reported that he's also on the spectrum, and that has come up in his call as well.
Yeah, they're getting better at identifying it.
They are.
Yeah.
They really are. It's no longer just the blanket term of autism. Now it's a spectrum, and you have neurodivergent, and there are several different flavors of it. I like this progression because I think it's not so much thought of as a problem or a stigma. It's just your brain thinks different.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are getting diagnosed as adults. I've had family members and friends get diagnosed as adults. Neil Gaiman, I just found out, was diagnosed as neurodivergent as an adult.
I was going to say, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way.
Yeah.
I mean, you would have to be, you would have to think differently to come up with the Sandman in that universe, if you ask me.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Let's see. I think that was all the teenage stuff. So rolling into adulthood, and I do understand that adulthood can be a wider range of topics because it's often a larger part of our lifetime than the earlier portions, depending on how old we are. But just focusing on maybe the first 2 or 3 things that come to mind. What, as an adult, what are some of your things that you've really impacted you the most in terms of the genre?
Well, I did start. Well, the thing is, when I turned 18 and I got access to a lot more books and a lot more movies than I ever had before, I just devoured whatever I could, and it all basically influenced the stories I would end up writing, as well as who I was personally. Some of the big ones, though, I got really into cosmic horror, H.P. Lovecraft, Robert Chambers, especially after I graduated college. I read those, and now they're pretty much a big part of my writing style, the cosmic element. In fact, one of my best works, or what I consider one of my best works, is a short story that is kind of like a continuation of The King in Yellow.
Okay.
Another big influence, slashers, slasher stories, or anything with serial killers. I was getting into Friday the 13th and Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street, as well as like James Patterson's Alex Cross series. So I was just diving into the world of serial killers, and that was all playing an influence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's talk about cosmic horror. What do you like about cosmic horror?
I kind of like the idea how humanity, we're very certain that the world is very solid and three-dimensional, and that we have an understanding, but then you pull back the curtain and there are dimensions upon dimensions. There are creatures that are so vast and powerful that the very contemplation of them can drive you mad, let alone seeing them, that there are secrets in this universe that would drive you to despair, that it's not a safe world ruled by a loving God, but a cold, nihilistic one, and ruled over by entities that see us as food or playthings.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my interests in the cosmic horror as well, is just the lack of control and the notion that there are things out there that you can't even comprehend. Just the acceptance that our brains are too simple to understand these things that are larger than us and may or may not have our best interests in mind.
Right.
Yeah, that actually reminds me. Earlier this year, I read The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Lavelle, and it was a 5 out of 5 amazing cosmic horror story. And what you said about things we can't handle or comprehend put me in mind of that, because it's about a guy, a black man living in 1920s Harlem, who deals with racism every day. And when it takes someone he loves away from him, he finds power in cosmic horror, in the use of Cthulhu and the Necronomicon and all of that. He finds something he can control and uses it to take charge in things he can't control. And it's an amazing book. I recommend it to anyone who's interested.
Nice.
What was the title again?
The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Lavelle.
Okay.
What about serial killers? What has been fascinating you about those?
I think it's just the idea that we can be so callous and cruel to one another and even derive pleasure from it. There's an abhorrence about it, but also a real keen interest in it. So that really is what draws me. And it's someone might not like me to say this, but it's kind of fun to just come up with a serial killer and their pathology and then let them loose in a story. As long as it's fictional and nobody's actually getting harmed, it's pretty fun.
Any particular story in that vein that jumps out to you?
I'm a big fan of Friday the 13th. I love Jason Voorhees. During college, I dressed up as Jason more times than I can count. Not just on Halloween, but like April Fool's Day. I once in the dorms, he hung out in the elevator wearing my Jason Voorhees mask and wielding a plastic machete. And whenever anyone would get on, I would go, "Ugh!" And they would scream or jump. It was really funny. One friend of mine, he basically screamed bloody murder. And then when she saw me, she was like, "God damn it, Rami."
What?
And I was just there laughing my ass off.
Right.
As you do.
As you do. But yeah, the thing about Jason is he's dangerous, he's powerful, he's terrifying, but he's also somewhat sympathetic. I mean, he had a really tough lot in life. He was born with a disability. He that really made his whole head misshapen. He nearly drowned and somehow survived, but never went back to find his mom. His mom went crazy and went on a
decapitated in front of him.
Yeah, she was decapitated. Then he comes back and he's uglier than ever. And he's like, I'm going to guard this camp for the rest of my life because you all killed my mom. It's going to be a memorial to the pain we were caused and which we cause. So I find that very interesting about him.
Mm-hmm. Anything in your adult life that actually terrifies you? Actually, I think we answered that one. You said not being able to pay the bills and actually some of the
rejection,
personal responses. Yeah, both related.
There's
to the
one more thing that does scare me, and it's basically just how easily hate, prejudice, ignorance can infect a person and take over their lives. Like, if you look outside, if you look at the news, we're living in some pretty divisive times. Everyone's angry about something or has an opinion about something. Everyone, without exception, prefers to stay within their own bubble and just hear more of what they like rather than be challenged upon it. And that's kind of scary for me because I'm Jewish, I'm neurodivergent, I'm bisexual, and there are plenty of people who, for all three of those, would like to see me dead just for that. Right. They're even proud to say, hey, I'm proud that I hate Jews, or I'm proud that I'm straight and that I fight against the queer agenda. And it's people like that that scare me because it's difficult to convince them otherwise, and they see nothing wrong with feeling that way.
Yeah, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Basically something along the lines of how you can't change somebody who doesn't want to change, that it has to come from within.
Yeah, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change.
Yep.
Or a leopard can't change its spots.
Yep.
That one too.
Start with the man in the mirror. But if you don't want to change, then if you see nothing wrong in the mirror, then nothing's going to change.
You can lead the horse to the water trough, but you can't make them drink.
Right. Flipping that question around, was there ever a time in your adulthood where you felt completely calm or safe or at bliss?
There have been times like that. Recently, I went on a short vacation to Marietta, this small town on the edge of the Ohio River. It's such a beautiful town. It dates back to the Revolutionary War. It's got all these old historic buildings. And I just had a really good time just exploring the town, visiting the graveyard and some of the haunted locations and some of the local shops, and just going where I wanted to go. It was lovely, and I had a great time. And I felt pretty at peace.
So was it just exploring the history, or just the fact that you're able to walk around without, being bothered, or what was peaceful to you about it?
It's just a very pretty town, and it's nice to be able to walk around and explore and just be my own person, see some friends, eat at the local restaurants. There's actually a couple friends of mine I met over there. They operate the local haunted tour company Hidden Marietta, and hung out with them for a little while, as well as a friend of mine who's a psychic portrait artist. She basically will paint your spirit guides for you and deliver messages from them.
Interesting.
That's what I said.
That's what we both said.
Yes. So say we all. So the next two questions we're going to ask could be the same answer for both, or it could be two different answers. Well, I guess let me ask this question first. What book have you read more often than any other, or what movie have you seen more often than any other?
Oh, good question. As far as books, I think I've read, it's somewhere between Needful Things by Stephen King and Kill Creek by Scott Thomas. I've read both of those numerous times and gotten a kick out of them every time. As far as movies, bit hard to judge, but I've watched one of my favorite films, Prince of Darkness, numerous times. So I'll say that one.
Okay. None of these have come up in the call yet so far, so let's talk about some of them. What do you like about Needful Things?
I like how very weird and quirky it is. It's about a small, I guess, antique / curiosity shop that opens up in a small Maine town, and the owner is basically this. Is he the devil? Is he some cosmic horror entity? It's not really clear, but he basically has something for everyone, and he's willing to sell them, provided you do something for him, a favor, and those favors inevitably lead to chaos, murder. He basically manipulates one young boy into causing his neighbors to kill one another. He makes a gym teacher go after his girlfriend's ex. He makes the hero, the main character's girlfriend, basically doubt him.
And so what did you like about these things?
All those things.
Yes.
Oh, well, I like that he's able to. I like how it's sort of like like watching trying to think, a pinball machine with several different balls, those bouncing off one another and watching the destruction unfold, but it's people. And it's just very creative and funny and inventive at times. I mean, one of the women he sells something to, she buys what she thinks are sunglasses that belong to Elvis, and then she becomes convinced that she's having a sexual affair with Elvis, and that puts her into conflict with her best friend, who's also having a sexual affair with Elvis. And it just goes crazy.
What did you like about Kill Creek?
Kill Creek is like modern gothic horror at its finest. It takes these 4 horror writers and puts them in a haunted house for a publicity event, but the house is really powerful and really haunted and has other ideas, and it puts them in so much danger, and it's really creepy because you're never sure what's happening. What is the house? What is it doing to them? Why? I have my theories, but I'd have to ask the author about them to get them confirmed. It's just a really creepy, great gothic horror novel, and I recommend it to anyone who's unfamiliar with the genre or likes gothic horror but has never read the book before.
Okay. So you kind of gave us an outline of what it is, but what did you like about it?
I like the atmosphere a lot of the book. It was very creepy. You never knew what was going to happen, and it just went in some directions I never thought. I never predicted, which after so many years in horror, I've gotten pretty good at figuring out directions a horror story can take. So it was a pleasant surprise.
Okay. Let's see. What about Prince of Darkness?
Prince of Darkness is one of my favorite horror movies. For those of you unfamiliar, it's about it's one of John Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy, and in my opinion, an underrated gem of his. Basically, the Catholic Church becomes aware that a possible end of the world prophecy is about to commence, and they invite a whole bunch of scientists from a local university to come in and try to prove or disprove what's about to happen. And obviously, shit hits the fan. It is not a perfect movie, but it plays with all these really fun ideas of like religion, science, cosmic horror, like Satan as a physical entity instead of like a spirit, and able to and different ideas about how possession might work. And what if God isn't a benevolent being watching over the universe, but a malevolent being on the other side of the mirror watching us and waiting for the day when he can escape to our world? Plays with all these ideas of faith, of science, of humanity and the truth. And I love watching it. I watched it this past Halloween, and I watched it with my parents recently, with my dad and stepmom at their place, and each time I got a kick from it.
So it asks a lot of interesting questions.
Yeah, and I think good horror often makes you ask questions, makes you really think. I mean, yeah, there's something about horror where you can just sit back, relax and enjoy a good scare, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I also really enjoy horror that really makes you think, makes you consider there's something like, what is truth? Or maybe, is perfection actually possible? Or is perfection in what we ourselves already are? That went very deep.
Yeah.
It did. Got me thinking.
So these three things that we just talked about, those were the answers to, what books or movies have you read or watched more times than any other? The other question that's kind of paired to this is, what would you consider is your favorite book or movie? And would it be one of these, or is it something else?
Kill Creek is definitely my favorite book these days, along with The King in Yellow.
Okay.
They're just very good stories that excite my imagination and scare me. And yeah, Prince of Darkness is one of my favorite films, so I don't hesitate to bring that up as like my number one choice.
Okay. That's why we ask them as separate questions, because you never know if it's going to be the same or different.
Yep.
Truth.
Do you see any common threads about what kinds of horror you like? Cannibalism, occult, metaphysical, supernatural?
Yeah, I tend to gravitate more towards supernatural horror stories. Ghosts, demons, cosmic entities, gothic. Both in what I read and what I write. I also like when the author tries to give an old topic a new twist. Like maybe fairies are real, but they're not anything like we experienced before. Or maybe what makes a haunted house? Is it really a ghost, or is it the memories we leave behind?
Is there anything relevant to the conversation at hand that you haven't had a chance to say or didn't get asked about, or maybe you thought of earlier and then the conversation took a left turn?
I would like to talk a bit about what kind of stories I do tend to write a bit more, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
What I like to write is basically very dark, creepy, but also very weird and entertaining stories. Like my novel Rose is my most popular work, and it's about a young woman who's turned into a plant-human hybrid. And that's just a start of her problem. So that's the kind of horror I like to write. I've also written my gothic horror novel, The Pure World Comes. That's about a maid who goes to work for a mad scientist.
I can see that being a problem.
Yeah.
Being a nanny or a maid or a nanny or, staff, basically.
Yeah, just, doing a little dusting here, just dusting off these beakers and Erlenmeyer flasks. And oh, shit, I dropped one. That's smoking. That wasn't important, was it?
Exactly. And I have another thing about that book. Jack the Ripper makes an appearance, so I had a lot of fun with that.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as like a summary of some of the things that we've talked about, this would be the point where we kind of summarize some of the topics that have been coming up multiple times in the call, and then maybe talk about those a little bit and how that intersects with your love of the genre. And the two things that I'm really hearing coming up multiple times, like these are broader topics that a number of things kind of fall under. And the first one is personal connections, which makes sense for a number of different reasons. I mean, like you've talked about being on the spectrum, potentially being alienated either due to sexual interests or, religion and the social views on those things, on all three of those things. And so desiring for having these personal connections and the effort necessary to put into those things to maintain them is obviously something that, if not is forefront at your mind, probably plays a significant portion, at least in the back of your mind on some level. And that ties in with a lot of the little different things that you mentioned. I mean, like, even the family connections of your mom and your sisters having a shared interest in this stuff. The thing that you talked about, exploring this pretty town and seeing the friends that you knew there and enjoying life. And so the other sort of main topic, I would say, has to do with power. Vampires are powerful creatures in their own way, both needful things in Kill Creek. There are aspects to power, as well as Ballad of Black Tom, and might be stretching a little bit, but it could be posited that maybe the power is a reflection on either the desire for the personal connections. And even though, maybe the protagonists in these different stories are not using them to, how can I say this? The protagonists may not be using them to help their relationships. I could see how that the having the power could be used like in a positive way instead of a negative way. But then again, maybe you just enjoy the power dynamic just because, for other reasons. It may not necessarily be related to this. Do you think these are accurate? Do you think that they're not accurate? Do you think there's something else in addition to this that I'm leaving out? Like, am I completely off the mark?
Well, I do agree that interpersonal relationships are a big part of horror, and I'm no exception. Like, a lot of horror is about people dealing with their trauma in their past and dealing with each other. Or even if there's a killer clown on the loose, you still have to deal with your abusive father or your parents who are forgetting you, or the bullies who want to kill you. So power is definitely, interpersonal relationships definitely something I try to explore in horror, or when I can. And power as well. I often characterize writing as like being a god over a world you create. So it's not as surprising that I think about power and our relationship to beings a lot more powerful than us. Whether they be human or cosmic, though in the terms of humans, when it comes to power and relationships, there is no entity out there that you want to be close to, but also fear as much as another human being. I mean, if you think about it, we all want to be close to someone, but we are also scared of getting hurt by that person.
Yeah.
No idea what you're talking about. Nope, I've never experienced that. Nope.
I am a rock. I am an island. Sorry. Any idea why it is that these are important to you? And I think the obvious answer there is because I'm human. But sorry.
Oh, I'm not human. What gave you that impression?
Well, sorry. Didn't mean to put words in your mouth.
I'm not sure. Maybe it's because I wish I had more power. These are times when it's pretty easy to feel powerless. I mean, everything's more expensive. The world's going to crap. We're seeing new troubles every day. It's not hard to feel like you want more power and control over your life, and to be able to maybe influence people to be a bit better in everyday dealings or on a national or international stage.
So the follow-up question is, why horror? Because can't you explore these topics in other genres?
I suppose you could, but I feel like horror has always been a lens into the fears and anxieties of any society at any time. I mean, you look at the horror that's coming out in any era, you're going to get a reflection of what people are afraid of, both on the surface and deeper still. I mean, look at Dracula. When it came out, London, England, it was diversifying. People were very scared of that. They were going to be overrun with foreigners who might corrupt English society, English people. And then you go forward a few decades later, a lot of the movies coming out were reflections of people's fears of like the Cold War, of nuclear holocaust, of the dangers of what science could achieve.
Would you like to play a game?
Exactly.
Why are you interested in digging into people's fears and anxieties?
Well, gotta say, it is a bit fun watching someone be like, "Oh my God, Rami, you terrified me. How did you know I'm this scared of that thing?" There's fun in that, but it's also just really fun to dig around with fear and play with it, and watch as how it has an effect on people. I mean, think of the Scarecrow from the Batman comics and TV shows. His whole deal is fear. He's fascinated by it, and so am I. Though I don't try and gas people to make them live terrifying hallucinations.
Chris gasses people a lot.
I do.
Sorry.
I'm doing it right now.
I try to make people hallucinate, but mostly just by making them stare at pieces of dead trees and splotches of ink and watching them derive meaning from that and have very vivid hallucinations from that.
I like it. It's like a nightmarish version of the ink blot test.
Interesting. The answers to that last question, I think, all kind of fall under power as well, which we've already kind of talked on. I guess just to follow up again, the previous question we asked was, do you think there's anything relevant that hasn't been brought up on the call? I guess maybe I could re-ask that again based on the things that we've now talked about.
Not really. There is something I do like about horror that other genres don't do as well, I think. And that's be therapeutic. It sounds crazy, but I think horror can be very therapeutic for those with the right mindset. It
absolutely can.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, horror is a reflection of the fears of any age, of the age it comes out in. So it's not too hard to think that horror might be a tool that people can use through the story they're digesting, they're taking part in, and to work through some of those fears. Like, how many people saw a movie about like giant ants caused by radiation and they felt better afterwards because they know that, hey, it was scary, but it's just a movie, and that kind of thing isn't really going to happen.
Right.
Take back their own power if you think about it.
Yes. One of our 3 goals, we have 3 goals with this podcast. The first is obviously fans of your work can come and listen to things that you've shared and maybe hear something that you either haven't shared somewhere else, or these are conversations that you're not likely to have in other podcasts where you're just talking about your work. The second thing that we hope listeners get out of this is that we don't shy away from difficult topics and try to talk about them in a healthy and respectful manner when they come up, and that may be helpful to listeners. And then the third reason we're doing this is because, after we talk to enough people, maybe a statistically relevant number of people, that we can start identifying what I like to say, not everybody falls into the same bucket of why they enjoy horror, but, what are the buckets? How many are there? Which ones are more common? Which ones are less common? And if we can start identifying trends that are, like I say, statistically relevant, and then hand that back to the rest of the the rest of the academic world and say, is this useful to you? And the stuff that has come up on this call, I would say it's stuff that we have heard before. But that's okay. It's another tally in that field, and it is obviously very appropriate for the things that you're dealing with and have dealt with. And I think that that's sort of the real underlying thing that we're coming up in with this podcast now, is digging deeper past even what the buckets are, and just acknowledging that, the humanity underneath all of that everybody has whatever their bucket is, and it makes sense for who they are and what they're going through in life. And if you can step back and look at that, then, I know you're not human, but there's stuff there to be recognized for people who are going through similar things.
Yeah, I can see that. And I hope I gave you some good data for your stats.
Yes. Well, and that's what I mean with the last thing I said, is it's not just about the data for the stats, but also other people who have similar experiences to you and maybe have similar personalities to you can potentially hear this and find something that they recognize themselves in. And, representation is important. We want to have a diverse, not only audience, but guest list. And so it's good to have your story to be added to the list.
I love that. I'm actually trying to include more diverse characters in my story, not just because it's a good idea, but just because I want to see more of those stories being told. I mean, There's not a lot of Jewish horror out there here, at least not as much as there is like Catholic, basic Christian horror, and I would love to see more Jewish horror out there.
Yeah,
as well
there's
as
a lot of
horror that focuses. What? I didn't catch that.
I was just clearing my nose, but I was also just agreeing. There's a lot of Catholic exorcism films out there.
Yeah, like the first Omen just came out, and that's like another drop into a very large sea. And honestly, I also want to see more stories that have LGBT leads out there, as well, or maybe show horror from the point of view of the neurodiverse. I'm actually finishing up this anthology right now called Spectrum. It's a collection of horror stories written by neurodiverse writers. A lot of them do talk about being neurodiverse, as well as LGBT or non-white or multiple other things. And it's just and some of the stories have really hit me right where the feels are. I just finished reading the other day this story by a Jewish horror writer I'm friendly with. It was probably the best story in the anthology, not just because it hit me on a personal level, but also just because it was so incredibly well written. And it just sucks that we don't see more stories like that. So I really am hoping we can able to maybe help diversify horror and make it so that everyone feels accepted, which honestly is all what horror is about. We take in what other places don't really care for.
And a second ago, you said you hope to see more stories like this, and we will, because you're part of the community that is creating that and spreading that. So it's going to happen because you're doing it. Be the change you want to see in the world, and we are also participating in that as well.
Yeah, and I'm very happy that people are responding so well. And I'm hoping to have more stories out in the coming months and years that reflect this. Like one of my recent works, the main character could be neurodivergent, and I don't come out and say it explicitly, but the signs are there. And in the 3D printer story I mentioned, my main character is non-binary and has a disability. And I'm trying to write that so we really see things from their perspective. Of course, I'm obviously going to do my research and at the same time make sure I check with a sensitivity reader so I'm not accidentally offending anyone. But I'm really happy that I'm able to contribute to this growing body of work that represents different voices and different ideas and perspectives.
Nice. Well, we will be getting together with you offline to write up a bio for you that's going to be on our website. And we will also get links to whatever social media you have so that anybody who hears this can come connect with you and find out more about your work and, find out where they can purchase your work and things like that.
God willing.
Yeah, right. Before we close out, do you want to give a final pitch to, I think, whatever, you've got going on at the moment?
Hey, everyone. If you're looking for a great collection of scary short stories, check out Hannah and Other Stories. My latest book. It's been out about 6.5 months, and it's gotten a lot of good reviews. It's gotten a lot of readers, and currently it's only available in ebook, but a paperback might not be far away. So definitely check it out. It's got ghosts and ghost hunters, budding serial killers, carnivorous horses, and so much more. I mean, as a horror fan, how can you say no to that?
Right.
I mean, you had me at carnivorous horses.
Cool. Well, we very much appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. And thank you to anybody else out there listening. Please do come visit us at horrormakesUshappy.com. We'll have, as we said, the bio page for Rami there. And you can also join us on Discord for our listening parties, purchase merch, support on Patreon, all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah.